Okay, it's Ivanchuk versus Radjabov, yes. So yeah, I've played this just briefly just now, so let's play for it. So d4, Radjabov sticks to his King's Indian defence, which he seemed to have abandoned in the recent World Championship candidates tournaments. He played a bit of the boring, more boring Queen's game at decline, but here he plays the King's Indian defence. So we have the classic hypermodern strategy of inviting white to occupy the centre, and we're going to try and black tries to blow up the centre later. And one of the most aggressive systems against the King's Indian defence is the 4 pawns attack. And you see with bishop e2, the f pawn hasn't been moved, it's still there. So this doesn't look like a 4 pawns attack. It looks as though bishop e2 is just another way of getting into the old mainline classical, which is knight f3, then you castle, etc. But in fact, there's a surprise waiting here very soon. Okay, this is not mainline classical now. The knight hasn't developed. This is the Averbach variation, I think. Boris Averbach, bishop g5, used this a lot. So it's more positional, bishop g5. So it could be an annoying pin, trying to sort of discourage black from playing e5 in fact later. Radjabov plays knight a6, and now we get a weird hybrid mix going on, which is why I think this game's got a strange pattern to it, actually. f4. I don't really get this. I haven't seen this much. I don't know if this is a new popular variation. So it's a cross between the 4 pawns attack and this kind of more positional, Averbach variation, bishop g5. So it seems to be quite violent. Okay, so c6, and now queen d2, as if white's going to castle queenside. Right, and there's still lots of possibilities like e5. Maybe this knight can reroute, and maybe b5 later. But who knows, where is the white king heading at the moment? Is white seriously going to castle queenside here? Bishop f3. In fact, he's delaying, keeping the tension on. Maybe e5 is now a threat, just to increase the scope of the bishop on this diagonal. So knight e6. So does black want the dark squared bishop? There's no bishop h6 here. This pawn, this mix of systems mean there's no natural bishop h6. That pawn is disrupting communication to the h6 square. So that's an interesting aspect. On the other hand, okay, so bishop h4 might be possible here because the queen is protecting f4 from that knight. So bishop h4. Any questions so far? Please speak up if there's any. c5 looks like a normal, King's Indian-ish idea to put more pressure on d4. Also try and liberate the bishop on the diagonal. The bishop on g7 really feeds on the dark squares being opened up by such moves like c5. So c5 seems to be a fairly thematic strike in the centre, but I wonder if black is now improvising, because this is a highly unusual mixture of 4 pawns attack, with this Averbach variation. So d takes c5, which to me implies, maybe d takes c5, something like e5 is going to be strong for this bishop on the diagonal here. So knight takes c5, keeping some pressure going on with the pawn on e5 for e5 to be answered with d takes maybe. So rook d1 again, exerting more pressure for e5. Now there's a pin on the queen, and this bishop's still lurking there, pinning that pawn potentially. If this knight's moved, that pin's going to be useful. So this is an uncomfortable position for black, I would say. Although it's not bog standard opening theory, white has certain trump cards from the opening. e4 is kind of secure with that bishop on f3. So bishop e6, but is there some counterplay on c4? Semi-open c-file. You can imagine some counterplay is being generated on c4. b3 just holding it up, not minding any potential weaknesses on the diagonal actually. Not too worried. There's nothing concrete to blow white apart. But you might think the king's still in the centre, you know, maybe queen a5, you might think. The king's still in the centre, surely. Is this, although it seems to be logical b3, does it carry with it some risk? Well, we'll find out now. So, a5. He doesn't even go for queen a5. I wonder, should we just engine verify this position? Is there something risky about white's play here? Let's just engine verify. Because a5 is quite committal. So a5 is not mentioned. Queen b6, rook e8, queen b6, queen d7, rook e8. Okay, it's about equal actually. Slight advantage to white. Nothing to write home about. Okay. So this a5, it means the knight's more secure against b4 for the moment. Also queen b6 anyway. Maybe this diagonal is going to be exploited. The bishop's here after all. Okay. So knight e2. Oh, sorry, I didn't know that about the engine, the stream structuring. So queen c7. Keeping an eye distantly on e5 as a break. So with e5 out of the question, where is white's strategic break now, I wonder? He can't use his h-pawn, the bishop's here. Maybe, you know, bishop g3 and e5 is on the cards. No, he just castles. Okay, he's not worried about doing anything significant yet. There might, in fact, in this position, because of that f4 pawn, be f5 on the cards. So a4. So that's a logical, you know, extending the scope of the rook, putting more pressure on b3 and the pawn chain in general. Looks like a thematic move. f5. So what's happened here? Tactically, something is happening here, which is very interesting. I wonder why the bishop didn't go back. Maybe the queen is not so hot for knight d5s if bishop takes f6, taking out that knight and knight d5. So it's part of this just simple idea maybe that knight d5 is a strong move in this position under the right circumstances. So takes on f5. So temporary pawn sack to emphasize maybe this d5 square, because he's going to take out the knight. Bang! That looks incredibly ugly move to have to play. But otherwise he's losing his dark square bishop to knight d5. So that's an incredibly ugly concession. If bishop d7, let's check that. I don't want to turn on my engine though, but I still think bishop f6 is strong here, with the idea simply of knight d5. The queen doesn't seem to be in an ideal place here. Okay. So takes b4 first. So that means this road is still closed for the rook. No ab. So knight b5, not knight d5. Knight b5. Because now there's another aspect. f6 is not an exploitable weakness. That's one thing. Although the bishop's hemmed in by it, it's not an end of the world weakness. More significant is this f5 is a target with tempo. So knight b5, the more effective choice apparently. Just to target f5 now, but check, giving black an extra move. What can he do about it? What can he do about knight takes d6 here though? It looks like a dangerous position. Maybe black's losing this already, because this looks incredibly ugly, this configuration here. f5 looks a great square for white generally, even if there wasn't a bishop on it. d5 looks great. This diagonal looks great. It looks as though it's just a wreck, black's position. It's not the usual counterplay at all in the king's engine. So knight g5. Blimey. So he takes on b7 for this tactic. Well, he would have rook takes f5 anyway if there wasn't knight takes d6. So takes So does he take, or does he play knight takes d6? That looks tempting as well. He just takes actually immediately. So this looks like a spectator piece, this bishop on g7. These two squares look very juicy for white, f5 and d5. This also looks kind of nice to be able to play knight g3 to h5. This also looks nice to play knight d6. The f file also looks nice. So basically, I don't like black's position very much. I don't know about you guys. This looks like a tissue of lies, as Fat and Mad would say, Costas Carrionis. It looks like black's position is actually a tissue of lies, to quote his expression. Knight e4 though, is there some tactical compensation on f2? Queen d3. The rook protects, okay. So there's a slight issue with f2. Knight d4, it's ignored at the moment. Now the knight's finally put under pressure. Rook e1's out of the question because of knight f2 check. Just that will be unpre. So what's the idea of rook f4? Maybe it's to reroute as well to pin the bishop. It's not just about the pressure on e4. So bishop f8, as though maybe d6 was a problem in some variations. Rook f1, lovely simple play. White's really got a dream position out of an unusual concoction between the 4 pawns attack and the Everbach system. So I find this game a bit of a shock. It's like a mixture of two different systems, and usually if you mix two systems together, usually you lose, because the goal of one system is often in conflict with the goals of another system, and usually that's a recipe for disaster. But here it seems the 4 pawns attack combined with the Boris Averbach system has worked out remarkably well. Mr. Hip says white threatened rook e4 and a knight fork on d6. Was that the case in this position? Sorry, here, rook e4. You're right. There'll be a family fork, wouldn't there? A family fork. You're right. When something was left there, because the rook is actually supporting d4. There's no pressure on d4 at the moment. So indeed, takes. You can imagine knight d6. So that probably explains bishop f8. Thank you. So the bishops made a concession though that this will now be check if needed. So a3 for the moment, strengthening the position before going on to the attack. The art of war or Nimzovich, yeah. So a3, and this is the sort of move missing in our games. You know, to be an attacking player, you first need to secure your position quite a lot. So with this move, the knight's more free to move for b4. Yeah, the knight can, you know, maybe come in for an attack without worrying about the queen side falling apart and losing the endgame. So king h8. So how has the attack progressed here? Knight f5. What are the immediate threats? Maybe again rook e4 is on the cards. Both knights are now targeting aesthetically the d6 pawn. So this is quite an aesthetic picture. The light square placements of the knights sitting on light squares on both sides of the board, targeting d6, and again maybe renewing this horrible threat of this family fork going on. So rook d8, again grovelling, defending d6. So where's the knockout blow going to be if d6 really is solid here? Knight c3. Okay, this echoes that maybe the diagonal is going to come into play here if this knight can be dislodged. So knight takes, queen takes. Queen's only one square away from probing h7. g7 is defended at the moment from the bishop. Yeah, this is live. Ask any questions you want. This is live. So rook, that rook moves to e8. So rook g4. So now actually rook g4 betrays a threat that actually queen g3 for rook g8 mate. So queen g3 is a mating threat. the back row is not a disaster at the moment for a decoy, because it's held up by the queen on e1, and it would be held up from there as well. So e1 is not decoyable at the moment. So queen c8, attacking that knight. Queen g3. Okay, it doesn't matter now, because actually rook g8 is threatening mate. So it doesn't matter about f5. So h5, check, and there's a clinical killing move, just emphasizing how would you emphasize the dark squares. Don't even think tactically, just think positionally. You just want to emphasize the dark squares. No need to think tactically. This should be a natural move just positionally, just bang. Just emphasizing g7 to be weak here. Now rook takes f5 though, might be queen g8. If rook takes f5, queen g8 looks crushing. But this was the end of the game. Let's just engine verify just to make sure we know our stuff here. So it's a mate in 2 it seems. If rook takes f5, actually not queen g8. Actually, let's just see. Queen g8 might actually be bad for white. Equal. That's not a way to play it. That will be equal. So in fact, the clinical killing move here is just rook takes f7 with the mate on g7 next. Okay, so that's rook takes f5, and if rook takes f8, then the knight and queen are coordinating on g7. So queen g7 is mate. So that was the knockout blow. Rook takes f8. There's no checks. There's nothing to speak of, because there's that threat of rook takes f7 as well as the threat of queen g7. Okay. So let's go back. Overview and summary. It seems to be a strange hybrid from a King's Indian player perspective of a mixture of systems, 2 different systems brought together in a rather strange way, as if white was playing the standard Averbach system positionally with knight f3, but no, we have a mixture now. We have a 4 pawns attack kind of pattern inserted. So a mixture of 2 systems, and this is still very dangerous. And now white's almost like playing positionally with bishop f3, just securing his centre, and making an emphasis of that e5 might actually be played. So c5, and white achieves just a very pleasant position here, just pointing at e5 as though e5 is going to be really effective. Takes time outrageously to play b3. There's nothing that can be done, it seems, to exploit this. Something like queen a5, I wonder about queen a5, and I can't resist the temptation to check it. Is queen a5 possible? Might have been about equal then. Knight ge2. That might have been better than the game. So it seemed committal to me, at least, to use a5 in response. So knight e2, then castle. So this f5 is the danger move now. It seems this queen c7 doesn't look as though, I don't know if that was sloppy queen c7. I think the engine was indicating about queen b6 actually being a more useful square. I think queen c7 is a bit of a setup tactically for something nasty. Queen c7, and it was actually used then tactically for a critical tempo gain. And it seems white's on the verge of winning this position now. With this horrendous structure, the double pawns, the isolated d pawn, black hasn't got too much counterplay. This knight's like challenged soon. First a3 to be able to challenge the knight on e4 with knight c3 very soon, like now. And now it's easy to, it seems by the evidence of the game, to get into the black king side now with just rook g4 and queen g3. So another strangely, these two wins we've looked at with the Coulson game in the same round look remarkably easy attacking wins, but there's a lot behind the scenes, I guess. Okay, so any comments or questions? Otherwise, I'll stop there. Great stuff. Thanks very much.